good day to you. This is on a galactic template. Oh, here comes the cat. uh, we are programmed to interact with the universe according to rational logic. Individual humans can choose to be governed by their logical, rational system, but that is quite rare. That is a two-edged sword because part of our irrational system is love, and love is the divisor. But the way the nations were distributed across the earth has resulted in approximately 150 nations, each of which has a representative in the United Nations, which was invented by a monster named Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And he talked it over with his buddy, Joseph Stalin, probably the greatest viper who's ever existed on the face of this planet, although he has a lot of contenders for that crown. The place where I first kissed my future wife was in that beautiful city of Yalta. Joseph Jugashvili, Man of Steel, Winston Drunkard Churchill, and Franklin Delano Crippled Roosevelt. And those three assholes decided how they were going to divide up the earth after the end of World War II, because by then, and it was 1945, that the fate of Hitler was already decided and the Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin. And then the United Nations came into existence. A group mind has no morality. That can only have one conclusion, and now that mankind is armed to the teeth due to the lust for money, and money is controlled by the group mind. The Communist Manifesto makes quite clear that the major goal of communism, such as it was or is the domination of the financial system of any entity, that is country or other organization of men. Once you get control of their financial system, they're sunk. That happened long ago in America. Also, every church has a group mind, and that's why you hate religion. But don't forget, you're being controlled with propaganda, so that your thought processes are directed where the group mind wants you to be, not where you want to be, where it wants you to be. The IDF, which is the abbreviation for the Israeli Defense Force, has gone against peaceful protests both on the West Bank and in Gaza, where the largest concentration camp of all time exists, that would be Gaza, who are asking for Israel to honor what it agreed to, and they have reneged. They have not done their part. Netanyahu, who was interviewed on the Lex Friedman show right here in the United States, publicly stated that whatever happens, the unification of the entire greater area of Israel will be occupied by Jews and by Jews alone. The Israeli nation is destroying the Gaza Strip, which is the most overpopulated place on earth. It's 25 miles long and 5 miles wide. They're twice displaced people. And now the Israeli government, against its word to the United Nations and to the world, is attempting to displace them again. And that would then be a doubly overpopulated region. And the entire Gaza Strip, they're half children. 50% of them are under 18. On the West Bank, during the peaceful marches, which were conducted by Palestinians to protest their illegal treatment, the IDF forces, the snipers, were directed to shoot them in the ankles. Not to kill them, but to set an example. And so that has been going on for quite a while. And now in the Gaza Strip, a legal Israeli authorized election process was undertaken not too long ago, where unfortunately Hamas was voted into power, but that's not who the Israelis wanted in power. And so they reneged again. The legal, democratic process of election was followed. It was monitored by world peace organizations, including the United Nations, and it was affirmed by our own representative, who apparently was unbiased, although you never know, said it was a legal, perfectly clean election. It has been stated by Israeli leaders since that they made a huge mistake by not rigging that election. And because they made that mistake of not rigging the election, Hamas, against all odds and against even the predictions of Hamas itself, were elected to power and then became the official representatives of the Gaza Strip. And you can find out what happened next from Norman Finkelstein, an amazingly astute and fair observer, and he has been since the 1980s, I believe he said. He will tell you what's going on in Israel right now, and he has many, many videos out now that explain everything since 1948. 3 years earlier, Franklin Delano Roosevelt met with Joseph Stalin, and the United Nations was formed. The United Nations was formed at the same time that Stalin and Roosevelt were dividing up Europe and the future of the world between them. And the United Nations was formed for one reason, and one reason only: to ratify the future nation of Israel, the most malignant country that's ever existed on the face of this planet. Because the worst scourge to ever hit this planet, certainly in modern times, was the Bolshevik Communists, the greatest terrorist organization that's ever existed, and it still exists. But who runs it? We know now. They're in Israel. That everything was directed to getting Israel back on the map. That is for a very specific reason. It's to wipe out their enemies. That in the economic structure of this world, petroleum has gone to first place. It's in Iran and Saudi Arabia and the regions around that, such as Kuwait and Iraq. That's where the last viable petroleum supplies are. And that's why United States aircraft carriers and warships patrol the Straits of Hormuz right now. How would you like it if the Russians had a fleet off the coast of New Jersey and just patrolled up and down our coast? Well, that's what the United States is doing on the opposite side of the world. Our warships are now in the Eastern Mediterranean because of what's going on in Israel. They're also in the Straits of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf. And there is a thermonuclear bomber headquarters on the island of Diego Garcia in the middle of Indian Ocean. It's due south of Tehran. And it's not that the United States is sponsoring Israel. Israel is sponsoring the United States now. That's why you have lobbyists who control this nation that are not Americans at all. I'm not allowed to say anything against the actual perpetrators, but it's well known. Everybody knows it now because the internet allows all information out. And you can check the papers from the past month. Anti-Semitic riots have been breaking out all over the world. Do you have any idea why? You as an American, the stupidest population that's ever existed, given your resources, your ability to become a modern civilized human and use your rational mind, you are incapable of that. But I'm not. I'm a free man. It's a very, very tricky and difficult situation to analyze what's going on in the world today. But everybody knows where the focus is. It's not in China. It's not in Europe. It certainly isn't in Ukraine. But here's a little clue for you. Since you're so concerned about Ukraine, since your government has ordered you to be concerned about Ukraine, you have no choice. You're told that you need to worry about Ukraine. Why? Because it's a diversion. The Russians have no reason to invade Ukraine. No matter how you look at it, and I am a very astute scholar of history, and I lived in Ukraine 5 times. I know everything there is to know about Ukraine and Russia and the conflict going on there. And as for Vladimir Putin, he's just a puppet, just as your Joseph Biden is a meaningless entity. The actual decisions that are made that control the course of history are not made the way you have been taught that they are made. Everything that you read in the news in the United States is pure propaganda. But on the internet, you can find out the other side. Who's really pulling the strings? You know how many Jewish billionaires there are in Russia? A lot of them have dual Israeli citizenship. Do you know why? The ones who don't have dual citizenship either in Finland or Portugal or several countries, billionaire Jews. They're also in Israel, extraordinarily overrepresented in the billionaire department. Billionaires tend to control things, don't they? Even an idiot knows that. So the standoff is not even newsworthy anymore, is a complete diversion. Do you know who the president of Ukraine is? He's a Jew. Did you know that? You know where he's from? You know how he got to be president? He starred in a TV show where he played the president of Ukraine. And then he became president. These are just little factoids that perhaps you can piece together in your spare time, but everywhere you look, from the beginning of the communist revolution, was completely controlled by Jews. Leon Trotsky was supposed to have been Stalin, but Leon Trotsky was a Jew. And these people know how to cover their tracks. Right after Czechoslovakia supplied arms in 1948 to the Jews of Israel, to the Lehi, and there were a couple of other organizations. You can read about that in Menachem Begin's book and Moshe Dayan's book, all of which I've read, of course. They talk openly about how the fact that without Czechoslovakian arms, they would have lost, and they almost lost anyway. They fought heroically. I used to think that the Jews were freedom fighters. From a certain perspective, they are. The humans that are dominated by whoever controls them, that tells them what to do, they're still humans. Moshe Dayan, Menachem Begin, even Netanyahu, the current president of Israel, they're humans just like you and me. But their government is not human. And that's the distinction I want you to make. That when you talk about who's doing what, don't talk about Jews. They're protected. Okay? You'll get in trouble. I don't care. But I'm still cautious, and I'm being cautious now. It's not the Jews. The reason Hitler tried to kill all the Jews was because he knew who the Bolsheviks were. That's a fact that you can check in history. Hitler grew up with the Marxists fomenting revolution. It was finally decided that Russia was the place for their attack, and they succeeded. They almost did not succeed. And it was only through the intervention of our James Bond, a man named Shlomo Rosenblum, who was born in Odessa, Ukraine. That man was a double agent, known to British Secret Service, who hired him and trusted him because the British had already been compromised. and the British Secret Service sold out the West. They sent Shlomo Rosenblum, alias Sidney Riley, to Petrograd, Leningrad, to stop the revolution. What that man did instead is he enabled the revolution. And that's why your James Bond was sent to Russia. From Russia with love. That's your James Bond. Played by a Scotsman who I happen to love, Sean Connery. A rare Scotsman, handsome. I'm Scottish, 1/4. And you can see handsomeness does not extend to all Scots. But that was the myth that I grew up with, that James Bond is the guy who saves civilization at the last second from, for instance, the Russians. The opposite is true. He was a Jewish double agent, but Hitler was after the Bolsheviks. He hated the Bolsheviks, and he lost the war because of his mania to destroy communist Russia, because the Jews had made communist Russia. They certainly had ample reason to rebel. The pogroms that were enacted, a lot of them in Ukraine against the Jews, were inhumanitarian in the extreme. You can find that out in the great Broadway play made into a movie called Fiddler on the Roof. Tevge, beautiful Jew, wonderful actor. And he showed how the poor Jews were being oppressed. Oh, they certainly the fuckly have been oppressed. Innocent people who got a bad name because of Zionism. This goes back to biblical times and before. Just so you know, the nation of Israel is a fake. They're not Israelis, not at all. They're just one tribe, okay? Judah. The ones that murdered Jesus are the Udans. They're the ones who murdered Jesus and were hated by the world for doing that. To this day, that is violently suppressed by your American teachers who teach you that the Jews are perfectly normal. Well, they are. But the Zionists are not. And the Zionists are the ones that financed the Russian Revolution. You can trace that back and find it out. You're not going to be taught it anywhere, but you can find out how the Russian Revolution was actually engineered. It was engineered from New York. And in the long-range strategy, which was culminated at Yalta, where Joseph Stalin, the greatest mass murderer in the history of the world, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the so-called leader of the free world, agreed on how they were going to divide up Europe. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt sold out half of Europe to Stalin. It was agreed then in Yalta in 1945 that the Russians, the communists, the greatest terrorist organization that's ever existed on the face of the earth, could have half of Europe. And they took half of Europe. And then the Cold War started. A complete and total illusion. The Russians and Americans have never fought each other, and they never will. Although, I shouldn't say that because pretty soon it might happen. NATO is backing Ukraine. And nobody is backing Russia. But Russia is now allied with Iran. And China is taking the side of Iran. And China is communist, in case you didn't know. And the second greatest wave of terrorism the earth has ever seen was when communism took over China. What you don't know is that communism has taken over America as well. And if you're a patriot and you just don't like that and you'd like to see me shot, then you can line up behind my good friend Hal Thurston, who would like to see Edward Snowden shot. This is a highly emotionally charged, desperate situation that we have now on Earth for rational men. I've already told you, I'm exempt. I will say, anything I want. And I'm telling you that Israel is going to win. They're going to get all of their goals. They cannot be stopped. Okay? It doesn't mean the Jewish people. I can't point the finger at Lex Friedman, who has the same last name with the same exact spelling as one of the Russian Jewish billionaires, Friedman, F-R-I-D-M-A-N. That man's father, that is Lex's father, who's a plasma physicist, was a guest on Lex's show. Yeah, so was Netanyahu, the leader of Israel. What's going on in Israel right now is the greatest atrocity that's ever been witnessed on the face of the earth, and that is saying something. Half of the people in the Gaza Strip are children, and the IDF is now targeting the children in preference to the adults because it's demoralizing. The conditions that exist in the Gaza Strip right now, today, December 3rd, 2023, are absolutely indescribably evil. All these people are innocent. They're refugees, which Israel swore to the world that they would protect if Israel were just granted its desire to have its biblical land back. They got their biblical land back and then treated the Palestinians under their control as animals and began shooting them in the ankles when they protested peacefully. You could study this for a very long time and get caught up in it, and perhaps your mind would be poisoned by it and you'd become anti-Semitic. I counsel you against that. That's the mistake that Hitler made. When Hitler invaded communist Russia, he treated them like animals because the Nazis had this dogma that they were the master race. At the bottom were the Jews because Hitler had lost his mind. He was driven out of his mind by the specter of Zionism, and he tried to destroy Bolshevism. But if he had gone into Russia with goodwill towards the citizens, they would have banded with him and marched on Moscow with him, because Bolshevism is nobody's idea of a good deal. And if you don't know that for a fact, you need to read Alexander Isievich Solzhenitsyn's monumental Nobel Prize-winning trilogy, The Gulag Archipelago. Archipelago Gulag. I read it twice. I cried. I still do. Because of the Russian people are good. But communism destroyed that beautiful nation. And they're still in power. Communism abdicated under economic pressure. We all know the fall of the Russian Communist Empire occurred in the 1990s. In 1998, I flew to Ukraine for the first time, and then I returned there to live. And I went back 3 more times. I found out everything I could about Ukraine, and what I found out about Ukraine, I could only find one book in the whole United States or world at that time, which really didn't have a completely developed internet system quite by then, 1998. I found one book on Ukraine, and it was on the forced starvation of the entire nation of farmers. Ukraine is a nation of farmers. Today, physicists, they're brilliant people and excellent fighters. They're good people, very good people. They're Slavic people. I love the Slavic people. I love the Russians, and I love the Ukrainians. So you can only imagine how it tears my heart in half to see the Russians are invading Ukraine. Why? Let me tell you why. As a diversion, to take all eyes off of Israel, as Israel completes its millennium-long program to dominate the world. The Zionists are not Jews, except That's their DNA. But this has nothing to do with DNA. That's the mistake that Hitler made. Because he was irrational. He didn't use logic, and so he could have won. He invaded Russia and came within an ace of winning the war. But his downfall, just looking back, just doing an autopsy. What do they call it when you look into the cause of death? He treated the Russians like animals as he went through. And the Russians hated the Bolsheviks and would have joined with the Nazis if the Nazis had just shown the slightest bit of rationality, humanity. But they didn't. They were brutal towards the Russians. And so the Russians fought against Hitler. They would have sided with him, but they couldn't because Hitler had made that impossible. And so Hitler was finally defeated, which was, you could say it was good, but no, it wasn't. It's just a question of which monster won. And the worst of the two monsters won. Stalin won. And then Franklin Delano Roosevelt butt-fucked and got butt-fucked with Stalin in Yalta to divide up Europe. Who has that right? You've seen in the movie Patton, and this is not far off the truth. Patton is actually on record. He got into a shitload of trouble for this. As he was closing in on Berlin, he couldn't beat the Russians because he was basically held back so the Russians could get Berlin. But he said, I'll start a war with the Russians and make it look like they started it, and I'll take them out. And there won't be any communism. And you know what happened to Patton for that. So that was a sordid, miserable story of World War II, following which what happened to Eastern Europe, and indeed to the Russians again, was beyond belief evil. 80 million Russians were killed by the communist regime. I should say, that's good enough. It's unbelievable what's been happening in my lifetime. The complete domination and ascendancy of the Zionists, who control America and Russia. They do. And that little tiny nation, funded with billions of dollars from Washington, D.C., and now populated with Russian Jews who are trying to get out of Russia because they can see what's going to happen, because they have inside information on what's going to happen next. Many of them have dual Israeli citizenship and they are clearing out of Russia. They're also clearing out of Ukraine. And they know, I can tell you what they know. There is going to be a thermonuclear, well, maybe not thermonuclear, but atomic weapons are going to be deployed very soon in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict in order to take your mind off of what's happening due south of there. In Israel, you know what the Israelis are going to do when they win? And they're going to win. They're going to invade Iran. But not the Israelis. The Americans are going to invade Iran. You are. Your generation will invade Iran. That's why we're patrolling the Straits of Hormuz. That's why we have the Diego Garcia thermonuclear base. That's why everything is happening in Israel. They are winning. And nothing can stop them now. They control everything, including what you think and what you're allowed to think, and definitely what you're allowed to say. And if I live long enough, they'll execute me. Good. They executed everyone else that I love, including Jesus Christ himself, killed all the prophets, killed 80 million people in Asia, infected China and killed another tens of millions there. Now China makes your shoes. Nixon went to China. Does that tell you anything? You got to put the pieces together, kids, to see what's happening in Israel. Absolute monstrous atrocity right now. It's happening now. They're killing the children on purpose. They have snipers, they have they're in the Gaza Strip just doing whatever they want. They've closed down all the electricity, the water, and the sewage. These are people, you can find out more from Norman Finkelstein, they're on the edge of starvation at all times. And now they're under siege. Worse than ever before. They've been under siege for decades. Nobody goes in or out of the Gaza Strip. Did you know that? What do you know? You know that the puppies are being hurt in Ukraine, and therefore you've got to send money to Ukraine. It's a diversion. The war in Ukraine is just a trench warfare now. It's just going to be dragged out forever. But it can't be dragged out forever. There are pressures on Russia and on NATO to resolve it. It will never be resolved. It can't be resolved. But what is going to be the outcome? It's that you are going to be looking at Ukraine while Israel takes out the Palestinians in their own country, which was stolen from them by Stalin and Roosevelt. I don't know how much more shocking any information could be. If I were trying to make money, I suppose that I could promote this horrendous message in order to generate viewership and get money for myself. I hate money. I don't want your money. I'm not looking for anything except the truth. And I can no longer broadcast to you about the secrets of the universe because it's not going to make any difference. I've already seen the reaction I've gotten after 2 years of broadcasting the secrets of the universe. Going all the way to mathematics, geometry, solving the quantum paradox, solving the cosmological paradox. What good is it going to do if we're on the verge of nuclear conflagration? It won't turn out that way unless something goes wrong, and something will go wrong. I've said that the Zionists cannot be stopped. They've already won, and they're just simply mopping up now. It's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, and there's going to be an invasion again. The United States has already invaded Asia, and the soft underbelly of Asia landed in Iraq, landed in Afghanistan, went back to Iraq, staying in Afghanistan. These are the nations flanking Iran. While the ships, the warships, patrol right below the oil fields. The United States has a complete embargo in place against Iran to strangle it. It's working. So the Iranians are turning to China and Russia. And you know how the United States is going to respond to that, already is responding. Full alert, full military status. We're right on the brink of another world war. But before that happens, the Palestinians are going to be genocidally eliminated in Israel. That has been the goal of the Zionists since they got there. And you can study that to see how the Jews arrived and progressively stole the land. And then under the auspices and aegis of the Zionist regime, which was illegally established by Stalin and Roosevelt, it's fully supported by the UN, which was the only thing that the UN ever did that mattered, was to reinstate the Zionist Israelis. They're not Israelis. They're Jews from Judah. That's why they're called Jews. The nation of Judah is the one that's killing their ancient enemy, the people who are now called the Islam people, but that's their religion. They're actually the descendants of Abraham, whom the Israeli Jews, that's their ancient enemy. They hate Persia. They want to destroy it. That's what they're doing. And they're going to use the might of the United States to do it. And that's the role of the United States in the world today. We are not the enemies either of the Islam people or the Russian people. They are our friends. They are basically our people. I consider the Islam nations to be my nations. I consider the Russians and Ukrainians and all Slavic people, the Croatians, all the Slavic peoples of the world are my brothers. Who then is the enemy? Well, it's not the Jews, but it's a cadre of Jews. Just as the people who destroyed the indigenous population of America, those weren't Americans who did that, but there were some Americans, there's a cadre of Americans, who have no moral sense. And that's what you're seeing in Israel. It's not the Israelis who are killing the Palestinians. I would suspect that most of the people of Israel abhor what their government is, they think it's forced to do. But this matter of survival of the fittest has really got us all by the nuts. Everyone in America is perfectly persuadable that if you're defending yourself, you have a right to do that. Well, the Jews certainly have a right to do that, but how did they even get there as Zionists? And that was the communists, and that was the Democrat Republicans, mostly Jews under the lobbyists, that control Washington, D.C. It's all for Israel. A fake nation of mass murderers. So that is the situation. The mass murderers are winning. They're going to win. And you get to witness it. I won't. I don't have too many years left. But you are probably younger than I am. And you're, oh God, I pity you. There is a way out, and I've been trying to tell you there is a way out. If you're studying astronomy, if you're studying science, especially astronomy, you're on the right course. Why? Because you're not using your emotional system. You're using your logic system, which will latch you to the universe, which, as I taught you, will latch you with superintelligence. You will become attuned to the creative mind. That's not spooky. That is science itself. We have emotions and we have logic. If you're dominated by your emotions predominantly, you're fair game. Just go ahead and vote. You'll never matter. But if you use your logic system, you'll see things for what they really are. It's not fun. It'll tear you in half. It's already torn me in half more times than I can count. But you know what doesn't kill you makes you stronger? You know where that is actually true? When you face reality. Because it'll kill you. It's killing me. I won't let it kill me. I'm going to broadcast the truth until I drop dead. I don't give a fuck about the Jews. What I do care about is man's inhumanity to man because it's unnecessary. Tomorrow, the entire Israeli nation could experience an enlightenment, call off the war, and start protecting their own people take the Palestinians and rebuild them, instate them as part of the nation of Israel, the world would rejoice. That's not going to happen because it's irrational. They're swayed by emotion. They hate. They're haters. If you succumb to that, you're going to hell. That's just the way it is. That will be your fate in the universe. You will be eliminated eventually. This universe cannot sustain hate. What sustains humans in the universe is love. Yeshua had pure love. And you know what happened to him. He said to you and me, it'll happen to you too. You're going to follow me to the cross, or you're not going anywhere. I've been there many times. I expect that I'll go there again. But if I am going to die, which I will, I'm going to die with him, not with the Jews. This is Anagalactic. 1 hour of contemporary events. I hope that you're not frightened so much that you give up on your rational logic. But I hope that you're frightened enough that you start concentrating on your rational logical system so you won't be a pawn in this evil game. You will be known to superintelligence as someone who changed their mind. That's called repentance. Give up on this world. I don't know what else to say because that's actually impossible, isn't it? Well, I give you the maxim which was handed down to me, and may it bless you. You have to be in the world, but you need not be of it. And to the degree that you're no longer of the world will hate you. Your friends will turn against you. Everyone will be against you because you're rational, and they're not. They will know that you're superior to them and that you're going somewhere good that they cannot go. Rather than let you get there, they'll kill you. That's what they did to Yeshua and the prophets. I would say good luck, and if I'm speaking to imbeciles, which I presume I am since it's Americans who listen to me, good luck. But to those who have rational intelligence and who know anything about superintelligence and what this universe is actually all about, I pronounce a blessing upon you. Not good luck. Not luck, not chance. Take the right path before it's too late. I'm on. I'm in.